Mike Pompeo is essentially the head neocon, or the embodiment of the neoconservative ideology within U.S. politics. Neocons are essentially conservatives who believe in the U.S. spreading democracy all around the world, right? They basically believe in endless warfare, or this is what they claim to believe in, right? Mike Pompeo pretends to be a staunch supporter of Israel and sort of a Christian fundamentalist type, but in reality, he is owned by corporations, finance capitalists, large industrial capitalists, military-industrial complex capitalists, and capitalists who own major banks. He is bought and paid for by them, and he uses the U.S. military and the CIA to carry out their bidding overseas. And he argues for this. He was the head of the CIA for a while, and he served as Secretary of State under Trump. So Pompeo loves to go on Fox News, the propaganda outlet of neoconservatives and the Republican Party, and he reacted to a speech given by Joe Biden. They're going to talk about China here. They're going to talk about jobs and working class families. Very interesting stuff. So let's see what Biden says, what Pompeo responds to him, and then I will respond to both their goofy asses. All right, let's go.
Dana.
Former Secretary of State and now Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo joins us now. Thank you so much for being here today. Let's get your thoughts about the speech last night.
Good morning, Dana. Good morning, Bill. You know, this was reminiscent of what we've heard from big government Democrats for an awfully long time. This idea that families are better off if we take more money and redistribute it across America is fundamentally the opposite of what you heard Senator Scott talk about and what conservative Republicans have been talking about for an awfully long time. We watched in the 4 years of the Trump administration an economy that was based on opportunity. We supported working class families. We built American energy independence. All of the things that are the central building blocks of American strength, not only at home but abroad. These are the kind of things that working people all across America benefit from, not these ideas of green climate change and we'll find you a job in some other state if we destroy your pipeline in the Dakotas. It was an odd speech, other than someone who believes deeply that a socialist vision of America, a big government vision of America, is what the American people want. I don't think that's the case.
While Secretary of State, you were really at the tip of the spear with this, the level of attention that America put on focus with Beijing. Here is President Biden on China last night on that topic.
We're in competition with China and other countries to win the 21st century. There is simply no reason why the blades for wind turbines can't be built in Pittsburgh instead of Beijing. No reason. None. There's no reason why American workers can't lead the world in the production of electric vehicles and batteries.
Yeah, what does he have right? What does he have wrong on that point?
Well, the rhetoric and the objective is noble and good, but the policies that he laid out after he spoke about that will fundamentally never lead to what he's talking about. If you raise energy costs in the United States of America, if you put big burdens on companies that invest here in America, if you reduce the opportunity for small companies to take risks inside the United States of America, then China will, in fact, have the opportunity to build those things. The goal was good, the rhetoric was good, but in the end, he's going to have to deliver on a counter-China policy in the same way that the Trump administration did for 4 years. We put tariffs in place when they dump products. We protected intellectual property. We shut down their spy rings. We've seen good rhetoric. What we've not seen from the administration yet is the willingness to actually confront the Chinese Communist Party in the way that it's attacking the United States.
Joe Biden kind of had a passing remark on immigration, really talking about passing comprehensive immigration reform, but not really addressing the issues that we're going to talk to a rancher here in a little bit. It's almost as if they want to just sort of sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, Dan, it was a little bit odd given the calamity that's at our southern border that he didn't spend more time on it. I'm always loath to criticize people for the things they don't talk about. But suffice it to say, this is a problem that is of such a magnitude. I was in Arizona last weekend and saw and heard from people who are having their lives, their ranches, their families really impacted by these people coming across our southern border. They're scared that there may be terrorists. They know there's drugs coming across the southern border. The fact that he didn't spend time at least laying out his vision for how to protect American sovereignty and how to stop the crisis at our southern border was a little bit odd.
Sir, thank you for your time. Mike Pompeo, thank you.
All right, well, that was quite the segment there. You know, I love hearing Joe Biden and Mike Pompeo's plans for helping American workers. You know, I believe them both so much. So let's talk about one of the first things that Pompeo says here, calling Trump's economy an economy of opportunity. Right? An economy of opportunity where 78% of American workers lived paycheck to paycheck. An economy of opportunity where 2 million people lost their health care in Trump's first 3 years before we were hit with a global pandemic. An economy of opportunity that signed NAFTA 2.0 to continue outsourcing people's jobs, where Trump promised on the campaign trail to end TPP and NAFTA and bring all these manufacturing jobs back home. I mean, the best thing that Trump probably did as far as the economy were like his stimulus checks, which some of us didn't even get, right? People who were still dependents on their parents didn't get a stimulus check, even if you're living on your own, paying for your own housing and food and whatnot. Even if you've been laid off of work and told you can't go to work and make money because of this pandemic, a lot of us didn't get those stimulus checks. So that's Trump's economy of opportunity, right? And Mike Pompeo loves to fearmonger about big government when the best thing that Trump did was have the government hand people a stimulus check while they were laid off of work. But the most important thing to keep in mind here was that Trump did promise to bring manufacturing back, right? He promised to make the U.S. a manufacturing hub once again, even though a lot of our manufacturing jobs have been outsourced after the signing of TPP and NAFTA. And he didn't do that. He signed a new trade deal that was basically the same thing. Manufacturing really hasn't changed in the U.S. There hasn't been this influx of manufacturing jobs that were promised, which is probably part of why Trump lost to Biden. So you hear Pompeo also here bragging about energy independence, right? The only reason the U.S. has energy independence is because of technological innovations in fracking, right? Multinationals can now frack and use fracking technology to extract a lot more oil and a lot more energy. But this does not mean that the U.S. doesn't still import tons of crude oil, especially from the Middle East and especially in places where our military, thanks to people like Mike Pompeo, are heavily involved. Right? It's not like the U.S. is just making all this energy enough to run our country. Right? The only thing that could do that, the only thing that could give us energy independence and give amazing jobs for the American working class would be the nationalization of the energy sector. As Mike Pompeo would say, more big government. That's the only thing that could actually change things for workers, and it would change. It would allow us to do something about climate change, moving towards renewables because we've now nationalized the energy sector. It would be better for the workers in that sector who are no longer being exploited by private capitalists looking to make as much profit as possible. The energy made by the nationalized sector could be reinvested, and you would no longer have production of energy determined by the Koch brothers or whoever else sits atop the privatized U.S. energy industry. You could have how we produce energy determined by what's going to be best for the working masses of America. This is the path forward, and this is not the path, obviously, that neoconservative Mike Pompeo are arguing for, or Democratic neoliberal Joe Biden are arguing for. Joe Biden frames his populism solely in opposition to China there. And Biden has that line there, that kind of goes along the lines of populism and opposition to China. He says there's no reason that wind turbines can't be built in Pittsburgh and not Beijing. And Joe, the reason that wind turbines are being built in Beijing instead of Pittsburgh is because the entire energy industry is controlled by a handful of wealthy capitalists, by a handful of multinationals. So if they have the ability to outsource their labor to a country where they only have to pay the workers $2 an hour and then ship the goods that are manufactured by those workers to wherever they need to go, they're going to do that. And that's what TPP and NAFTA allowed. Was previously the government said, no, we're going to do protectionism. We're going to stop multinationals from exporting their labor to countries where they can exploit cheap labor, but those have been decimated because capitalists have gained a stranglehold on the state in this era of what we call neoliberalism. So the reason that these turbines are being produced in Beijing instead of Pittsburgh isn't because China's so evil and bad. It's because we need to nationalize the energy industry and launch a major jobs program in the U.S. Even a social democratic fix, although I believe it would be temporary, right? Although I believe we need nationalization of the energy industry, even doing a new deal similar to what FDR did would, you could immediately create a public jobs program in Pittsburgh building wind turbines if you wanted. But you guys don't do that because you're bought by these multinational corporations who are outsourcing their jobs to places where they can exploit cheap labor. And a lot of the rhetoric here from Biden and even from Pompeo I like, right? Like we want to produce more in America. We want to give more jobs. We want to increase the standard of living of the working class. Of course, this is just lip service. Of course, they don't really mean it. Joe Biden might have to do some things because the unions basically actually got him elected. In his party, you know, there's actually a lot of socialists in the Democratic Party now who are demanding that he actually do something for the working class. But even when they talk about workers, even when they pretend to be pro-American worker, they have to frame it from an anti-China viewpoint, right? It's got to be, we're in a battle with China in the 21st century, Biden says. All these turbines are being produced in Beijing. So you have Biden saying things like that, saying, yeah, I'm a populist so that we can beat China, so that we can be better than China, not just so that we can make our workers better off and then, you know, trade and have mutual development with China. It's got to be framed in this frame of the new Cold War against China and even Russia. So you have Biden saying that, and then you have Pompeo coming on here to push him to be more hawkish towards China, right? Your policies aren't harsh enough towards China, Joe Biden. You need to confront the CCP right now because that's what American workers need. The CCP isn't stealing our manufacturing jobs. They're giant multinational companies run by the Koch brothers and shit who are outsourcing everyone's manufacturing jobs to places where they can find cheaper labor. This has to do with privatization. It's not a problem with the Chinese government or with too big of government in the U.S. Like you hear Pompeo here arguing for deregulation, right? All this outsourcing is happening because of the deregulation. Pompeo, deregulation is what caused so much outsourcing, getting rid of the government restrictions on trade that were TPP and NAFTA that stopped multinationals from outsourcing manufacturing jobs. But you, Mr. Pompeo, helped destabilize entire countries that tried to raise their workers' standard of living so that the U.S. multinationals can continue to outsource jobs and can continue to extract cheap resources and labor. And then here you are blaming the Chinese Communist Party for the fact that there's no production and no manufacturing jobs in the U.S. And then, of course, he has to end with the immigrant fear-mongering, too. Right? These people are such scumbags. Like, oh, look at what's happening at the southern border. Isn't that bad for workers? The most refugees in the world are coming from Libya, Syria, Venezuela, all places where the U.S. has launched economic warfare campaigns or have fully invaded. So you have Mike Pompeo, who's been in the CIA and the State Department for years, destabilizing and destroying countries so that people are fleeing en masse to try and find a better life for themselves and their family. And then Pompeo turns and looks at the people fleeing from the countries that he's destroyed and he says, oh no, think of the American worker. Why didn't you think of the American worker before you continued economic warfare campaigns and launched missile strikes into Syria, Mike Pompeo? It's because you don't care about the American worker. You care about your multinational donors. And a lot of these wars against countries where refugees are fleeing from have been carried out at the behest of the energy industry. The energy industry and the oil companies and folks like the Koch brothers who say, hey, can you destroy Iraq for us? Can you get that leader out of power in Libya and Syria? They're trying to nationalize parts of their industry. They're kicking the U.S. out and they're saying their workers have to be paid better. We can no longer just extract cheap resources and labor. And then folks like Mike Pompeo and the U.S. military and the CIA go in and destabilize these countries so multinationals can continue to outsource manufacturing jobs. And then they turn around and say, oh, think of the American workers. Isn't Joe Biden screwing over the American workers? No, the entire system is built to screw over workers, outsource their jobs, and destroy foreign countries so that they can't bring their workers out of poverty. And only through nationalization of our energy industry and only through workers seizing power over both these corporatists, Mike Pompeo and Joe Biden, can we actually create a system that makes sense for the American worker, which is what we got to do. It's called socialism. Check it out. All right. Peace out, everyone. Solidarity.